To discuss the fight against corruption and the treaties signed with the United Arab Emirates, I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by legal practitioner Mr. Wahab Shitu. Thanks for joining us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's begin with the 4 treaties that were signed today already. It's being called a milestone event today. How significant is it for you?
Well, it is very, very significant because it demonstrates the commitment of this administration in concrete terms to fight corruption by conforming with international standards and best practices. Because when you want to fight corruption, there are certain key, indicators of seriousness. You must have mechanism in place for prevention, mechanism in place for criminalization and law enforcement, mechanism in place for international cooperation, mechanism in place for asset recovery, and mechanism in place for technical assistance and information exchange. Now, this particular treaty, the instrument signed by Mr. President today is very significant because it shows that this administration is totally committed to repatriation of our stolen assets, particularly those assets that are stashed away in United Arab Emirates. We all agree that most of these assets are our assets and Commonwealth are such a way in these countries. So now if you want to, if a country wants to get involved in mutual assistance legal treaties to repatriate these funds, the country can do so in about 4 ways. One is through multilateral treaty involving, several countries. The other one is through a bilateral treaty involving 1 or 2 countries. And a country can also facilitate that through domestic legislation. And lastly, through the principle of reciprocity. Now, what the country has done here is to sign a formalized agreement between Nigeria and United Arab Emirates, under which there will be cooperation and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. There will be cooperation and mutual legal assistance in civil and commercial matters. And there will also be cooperation and mutual legal assistance in a return of sentenced persons.
Well, let me help you out there. Sentenced persons being returned, and then the extradition treaty. I was going to ask you whether that's the bite we actually need, the anti-graft agency actually needs to enter the territory like that. Yes,
because by virtue of that treaty, this bilateral treaty between Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates, it imposes obligations on the 2 countries to respect obligations contained in those treaties with regards to the offenses covered under those treaties. By virtue of the principle of pacta sunt servanda, which means all agreements, all international agreements must be respected.
This is not the first time we've had some sort of agreement with the countries abroad, with the US, with the UK. What did you say to those who criticize Nigeria, saying that we do not always respect some of these treaties?
You must agree with me that this administration is committed. In terms of international goodwill, the international community trusts this government by virtue of the leadership, the moral authority of the president and the moral authority of the vice president, including the commitment, the advertised commitment of this regime to fighting the anti-corruption war. So it is not going to be business as usual. Nigeria under President Buhari is committed to total fight against corruption. And this has been demonstrated by the signing of these treaties today.
Let me draw your attention to the treaty, to the agreement on mutual legal assistance, which you spoke about earlier, in civil and commercial matters. There's another one in criminal matters. How exactly does it work?
Well, how it works is that it will allow cooperation between Nigeria and United Arab Emirates in the areas of investigation, in the areas of prosecution, and in the areas of judicial proceedings. Which means in the area of investigation, by virtue of that, this treaty, we can have access to, financial records. Nigeria can have access to financial records in United Arab Emirates. They could also, by virtue of this, take advantage of, searching. They could obtain search warrants to search premises. They could seize properties by virtue of warrants, established in that. And they could also secure, collaboration with the judicial system, in the United Arab Emirates. And this is mutual. In the same way, United Arab Emirates also has, some of these advantages to take advantage of it. They can also take advantage of these measures from Nigeria. So it's a bilateral thing, a mutual understanding between the two countries to cooperate in the area of investigation, in the area of prosecution, in the area of judicial assistance, in the area of confiscation, in the area of sales of properties, and in the area of repatriation of stolen funds.
Good. Well, talking about repatriation of stolen funds, I was going to get to that, because one of the biggest criticisms you have is even when funds are returned, stash funds are found. We hear all the mind-boggling figures out there. Properties are confiscated. How does that help the average Nigerian? Where does the money go? And does it improve has it improved the life of anyone to hear billions have been recovered? Where does it go when it's recovered?
I think the major difference between this administration and previous administrations that has been in charge of this kind of exercise is the transparency and accountability that has been shown by this government. And that is why most of the funds that have been recovered are carefully documented. And then there are plans to plug back some of these resources into the developmental process of the country. So I think it is not going to be business as usual. These funds are being recovered in order to reinvigorate our economy. The president says so. And also enhance our national security interests. So I think the first thing we have to do is first thing first, we have to identify where these assets are. Take steps, legal steps to confiscate and get these assets returned back to Nigeria. And then when these assets, and then you see there are a lot of bills that have been, they are in the works. The Presidential Committee Against Anti-Corruption. They have several, bills in the works, bills to take care of asset management, bill to take care of some of these recovered assets. Right. So it is not going to be a case of these assets being recovered and then stolen. Right. It will be plug back into our economy for developmental process.
Thank you so very much, legal practitioner Mr. Wahab Shitu, for joining us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.